businesses more to deal with red tape, the time involved, the compliance, the professionals that they have to hire. But it's not only about time, it's also about accountability. Governments ultimately have two powers, the fiscal, the tax and spend, and then the regulatory side. And on the fiscal side, we have a budget. We can monitor that, we can see trends, we can monitor outcomes. But we really have nothing on the regulatory side to say, well, okay, if we do this, what are we going to get for it? So in a few weeks, Alberta MLAs will actually be voting on a private members bill that gets at that accountability piece on regulations. Which leads me to another theme, breaking down trade barriers. The BC Alberta Trade Investment and Labour Mobility Act, we're working on it's been signed, and now we're working on the implementation phase. And there's a few key themes of this and how it relates to labour shortages. Ultimately, the goal of this legislation is that a business in Alberta and a business in BC will be treated exactly the same. So it eliminates some registration requirements because you could be considered registered in both if you had registered in one. Also, access to government procurement opportunities, but most importantly is labour mobility. Allowing folks that are registered to work in one province to seamlessly move over to work in another. And there actually are a lot of barriers. It's quite interesting that on the TILMO website there's 23 pages of occupations where those requirements are very different. Some of them are just ridiculous to me. You know, a funeral director has different requirements that they can't work in both provinces. And if you consider our members, many of them are independent contractors. Perhaps a welder working on a pipeline gets to the BC border, and then can't keep working even they're doing the same work. So these are some things that we're thinking about. And it's important because TILMO was designed so that other provinces and territories could join on. So that's a nuance to consider as we move forward. Additionally, at the municipal level, municipal governments also have these barriers. If you're registered in one municipality and you want to do business in others, you often have to get a non-resident business license. This can be very costly and time-consuming. So I think the outcome of TILMA is to start looking at that municipally as well in Alberta. And it's really win-win-win. Where we've seen it happen in BC, revenue for municipal governments went up because compliance increased. Businesses benefit from the time and the cost that they don't have to spend tracking down all these licenses, but consumers also benefit with more choice. I also wanted to show you this about what's going on with Alberta's finances. I think many people would agree that probably a reasonable increase in government spending would be one that is relative to population growth and inflation. If the Alberta government had kept spending to inflation and population, it would have increased about 72%. Instead, spending has increased almost 160%. And this is important because it limits the government's capacity to do anything on the tax cut front side. And the way that relates to labor shortages is that when we ask our small business members, what would you do with tax cuts? They say, invest in employee wages, invest in training, purchase equipment. So by government letting spending get a bit out of control, we've really eliminated that capacity for tax cuts, which gets then reinvested in businesses and Alberta communities. Now, you won't hear from CFIB that immigration is the only solution to the labor shortage, but it is part of it. And I wanted to show you this graph, which shows a little bit of the systemic problems that we're seeing. The blue lines show where the needs are in small and medium-sized businesses. And you'll see in skilled and technical and intermediate and clerical type positions is where the real needs are for small firms. But yet if you look at the gray line, that's looking at the immigrants that Canada is bringing in under the permanent system. We're bringing them in through the professional class. So there's a real mismatch between the immigrants that we're bringing in and the needs of the small business community. We recently released a brand new report on small business views on the environment. And one of the key themes was that our members think you can grow the economy and protect the environment at the same time, that those goals aren't mutually exclusive. But this question I found really interesting. We asked members, with respect to environmental issues, what are your motivations for change? And the top one is their personal views. Small business owners are motivated because how they feel about the environment and protecting it. The potential for cost savings, 1 and 2 members mentioned that. But then if you look down there, 28% of members said the views of the employees. So I find that very interesting as we look forward in respect to labor shortages, that small businesses are going to be looking to more respond to the views of their employees with respect to environmental changes. So that's all the thoughts I wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I will pass it along to Gil.
Thanks. I will not be using the PowerPoint presentation. It probably comes as no surprise that the views of our federation are slightly different than the views that we've heard from the CFIB. And it's like that old saying goes, your view of things depends a lot on where you're standing. And you know, and I want to get into a short discussion about the view of labor, about what's happening in our economy and our labor market. But I basically want to do 3 things with my presentation this morning. First, I want to take a look from a labor perspective at where we are right now in the Alberta economy generally, but with the labor market specifically. Then I'd like to move on to a discussion of where we would like to be. And finally, I'd like to conclude with a discussion of some of our suggestions for how to get there. So let's go back to the first question about where we are. Now, I think that all of us can agree that by almost any definition, Alberta is on a roll. We're setting records in terms of investment, GDP growth. We're setting records for low rates of unemployment. But, and these are all good things, you know, corporate profits, you know, projects that are being developed. But from our perspective, as an organization that represents working people, the real measure of the success of an economy is how it, and to borrow a phrase from a friend of ours, is how it benefits the Marthas and Henrys. And on that score, we're not convinced that the Alberta advantage is being enjoyed as widely as we think it should. And the question that we're asking, in some ways, is a different question that our friends at the CFIB are asking. They're talking about what do we do about the labor shortage. We're asking the question is, why is this tight labor market not translating into better outcomes and conditions for working people? And just to give you a sense of why we're a little bit concerned about what's happening in the labor market, our Federation of Labor we crunched some numbers over the summer to look at the situation with wages and income in this province. And we came to some, frankly, surprising and disturbing conclusions. You would think that during a time of economic boom and tight labor markets, that would quickly translate into significant increases in wages and income. That's what basic economics tells us should happen. But what in fact has been happening is that the wages for the vast majority of people in this province, about the 80% of the people who are clustered around the middle, have remained stagnant in large measure despite the boom. So just as an example, we looked at average hourly wages in the province over the last 5 or 10 years. And what we found is that when you adjust for inflation, the rising cost of living, the average hourly wage has actually moved from $19.37 an hour in 2001 to $19.30 an hour in 2006. And that's a cross province average. But that same kind of stagnation was also observed in industry sectors. So for example, and this may come as a surprise, even in construction, the average wage when adjusted for inflation actually dropped from about $25 an hour to just slightly over $23 an hour in 2006. Now, this may seem a little counterintuitive because it's true that incomes for individuals and families are going up, but it's because they're working longer and working harder. And another statistic that we pulled up, which I thought was telling, is that even during this unprecedented boom, fully 25% of working Albertans, those people earning wages in the province, fully 25% are still earning $12 or less, even in booming Alberta. But I wish that our reasons for concern ended there, but they don't. Stagnant wages are only one of the things that our members are concerned about, the things that we're talking about around our kitchen tables. There's also the question of housing, which is the biggest single expense that most of us will ever sink our money into. We took a look at the trends. I don't think I can tell you this. The average housing price in Calgary is $500,000. In Edmonton, it's $450,000. Just yesterday, in Fort McMurray Today newspaper, their average housing price had reached $640,000. We also took a look at how those housing costs had exploded. In the Edmonton market, for example, in 2003, it took about 5 times an average person's income to buy a house in 2003. Now it's 10 times an average person's annual income. So, and for us, that's a litmus test. The litmus test of a successful economy is, can a person earning a middle-class income afford to live a middle-class lifestyle? And we're concerned that that's becoming out of reach for too many Albertans. There's also the legacy of a decade of underinvestment in public services. So, we've got this booming economy, people are coming to our province from all over, but they're coming to communities that are being stretched to the breaking point. They're moving into neighborhoods where they either don't have a school or the school that they have is crumbling. And then, of course, there's the question of infrastructure. We're not only not maintaining what we have, we're not building what we need to be economically viable in the future. There's also, I think, a growing unease among people in the labor movement, and probably working people more broadly speaking, about the response that employers and government are taking to the tight labor market. So, just as an example, over the last few years, we've seen the government respond to a tight labor market in the service sector by allowing 12, 13, 14-year-olds to work in restaurants. We've seen initiatives to water down the apprenticeship ratio to get more warm bodies on work sites. We've seen governments embracing agreements like the Toma agreement, which, frankly, from our perspective, is addressing a problem that doesn't really exist. There really aren't as many problems with mobility between provinces as some people would let on. But what it does do, from our perspective, is open the door to dumbing down trades and certification. Because the bottom line is that we do have different systems of certification in different provinces, and there are marked differences between Alberta and British Columbia. And what we're afraid that this is going to do, for the short-term goal of getting more people on the work site, it's going to set off a race to the bottom in terms of certification and training. And then there's the whole question of temporary farm workers, which we can spend a lot of time on. But one of the immediate, responses to this, to the tight labor market, is to look for the quick fix, get more temporary farm workers into the province. It used to be that we would have a couple of thousand temporary farm workers in this province at one time. Last December, when they took their last count, there were 22,000 temporary farm workers in the province. Since that time, last December, the number of applications for temporary farm workers has increased by more than 400%. We're estimating there's about 60,000 temporary farm workers in this province right now. And that's a quick fix. It puts more warm bodies on the work site, but it also creates this growing class, underclass we would describe it as, of exploitable workers. And the question is that really the road that we want to be going down as a society? And finally, we also have this growing concern about the future. Because right now, people, in many ways things are going well, but I think people have to recognize that in many important ways, the boom that we're living through right now is not really an energy boom, it's primarily a construction boom. So for example, we've got about $120 billion of investments either underway or on the books, and fully 60% of those investments are tied up in major development projects in Fort McMurray. The big question that we in the labor movement are asking, and I think a lot of individual Albertans are asking, is what is going to be left after the construction boom has ended? What we're afraid is that once the dust settles and the work is done, what we're going to be left with is a pipeline, taking our resources down to upgraders and refineries in places like Illinois and Texas and Ohio and Kentucky. And that's not a legacy that will provide us with the economy to keep ourselves employed, keep our children employed. So that leads me to the second big area that I want to deal with, and that's the question of where do we want to go? Now, we in the labor movement think that you only get someplace if you have an explicit vision for where you want to go. And I think that we should be saying much more firmly than we have been that our goal is to build a value-added energy economy. And I underline value-added because right now we have an energy economy that's primarily about extraction and shipping. So if we want to get to this place where we can move up the value train, create more jobs, and a more sustainable future, we actually have to set this as a goal. So, right now we are, what we in the labor movement think that we should be doing more of is upgrading, refining. We have to move up the value chain instead of just being extractors and shippers. And to use an analogy, as it stands right now, our energy economy is sort of like an unbalanced bodybuilder. You've seen these guys with the big shoulders and the big arms and the spindly legs. That's what our energy economy looks right now. The upstream, the extractors and the shippers, okay, all bulky arms and bulky chest, but our downstream, which is really our future, is the spindly legs. Now, to put that in perspective, there are about 80,000 people directly employed in extraction right now, and that's been growing. It's grown about 50% over the last 5 or 6 years. But on the downstream side, we've actually shrunk the numbers. We're going in the wrong direction. So when it comes to people working in upgraders, refineries, the petrochemical industry, we've actually gone from about 21,000 directly employed to about 16,500 right now. So the alarm bell should be going off. The other thing that I think we have to keep in mind is that we're setting up a system, setting up a scenario. If action isn't taken right now, we're setting up a scenario where we're going to miss out on this opportunity to build a value-added economy. Decisions are being made right now by governments and by big industry that may close the window of opportunity that's available right now. If you talk to people in government, they'll say, oh, don't worry, we've got 14 upgraders on the books. They're going to collectively be able to process something like 3 million barrels a day of bitumen. But you know what? We're also building pipelines at the same time. The Keystone pipeline was just approved a few months ago. There's another pipeline called the Alberta Clipper, which is being discussed right now. Keystone would allow the export of nearly 600,000 barrels of oil every day. And the Alberta Clipper is even bigger. So if you add up the amount of bitumen that could go down these pipelines, it's about 1.5 million barrels a day. And that's almost exactly the amount that people say that these upgraders that are on the books right now are going to be able to upgrade in Alberta. So we're setting up a situation where our homegrown refiners and upgraders are going to be competing for the exact same resource that's going down the pipeline to places like Illinois, Texas, the list goes on in the States. So, and once those investments are made in the States, these are $1 billion investments, they won't be unmade. So we have a very small window of opportunity to make a value-added economy happen in this province. Now, I know I'm taking a little bit longer than I expected, but I just want to wrap up by addressing the question, how do we get from where we are to where we want to go? Now, from our perspective, when it comes to developing a roadmap for Alberta's future, being a labor movement field, we have a choice between a high road and a low road. The low road says let the market decide. It says leave individuals and families to fend for themselves. The high road says we do best when we work together and invest in our people and our community. So what's needed to deal with our current challenges, I think, and to move us to the next level of economic development in this province is for governments and business to embrace the things that they've been most reluctant to consider. Planning, coordination, and dare I say the dreaded R word, regulation. So I actually have a sort of a 10-point list of specific things that I'd like us to consider that I think could move us to that next level. I'll try to move through them quickly. The first thing that we really strongly believe is that we should be taking a very significant portion of the revenue coming in from our energy resources to invest in research and development, focusing on what is our competitive advantage, which is the energy industry. And we should be looking for new technologies to move us from oil sands 1.0 to oil sands 2.0. Because we're facing a whole bunch of challenges here, technical challenges, right? We've got frankly a dirty industry that uses way too much oil and way too much water, and presents all sorts of environmental hazards if we actually develop it. So we should be investing in technologies that will allow us to become developers of cleaner oil sands. And there's a precedent set by this. The oil sands were first became exploitable because we used public money to develop the technologies to take it out of the ground. We should be using public money to move us to the next level. The second thing is to adopt a very clear and specific value-added strategy. We simply cannot leave this to the market, because if we leave it to the market, big energy companies, which are already have existing facilities in the States, will make decisions that work for them, but which maybe don't work in the best interest of the broader Alberta public. So they'll invest in upgrading and retooling their existing facilities in states rather than building a plant here. So we can't leave it up to them to decide. We have to consider things, as I said, like regulation, export regulation. It was used by Lougheed, like Premier Lougheed in the 70s to create our petrochemical industry. We need the same kind of thinking today, or else we're going to miss this opportunity to build a value-added economy. And we also, frankly, have to think about things like public participation or public ownership. If the big oil companies don't want to build here, don't want to upgrade here, we've got some strong cards to play. We might want to take a leaf from our recent past of Peter Lougheed's and the creation of the Alberta Energy Company, or take a leaf from Danny Williams' playbook in Newfoundland and talk about using public money to create public companies that will do things in the public interest that the market may not. I'm going to skip a couple of these things because I want to just mention two more, which I think are really significant. First of all, it's one thing to set strategies and build your dominant industry, and you also have to develop, you have to build your human skills. So I think that here in Alberta, with the resources that we have, one of the things that we really need to do is declare a war on low skills. Because one of the reasons that we have 25% of our workforce working for $12 an hour or less is because they don't have the skills to climb the ladder. And I think a lot of people in this room have probably seen the statistics on literacy and numeracy. We've got fully a third of our workforce that doesn't have the literacy skills or the numeracy skills to function effectively in a modern economy. And we're letting these people slip through the cracks. And we talked about a labor shortage. There's a pool, a potential pool of workers out there who are not being pulled into the mainstream economy. And instead of going overseas to bring temporary foreign workers into the country, or even pulling people from other parts of the country, we've got this huge pool of underutilized people, and the thing that's stopping them from moving up the economic ladder and taking those more responsible jobs are their problems with literacy and numeracy. So that's got to be a challenge. And one of the specific things that we might want to consider is what's something that they're doing in Quebec. It's called the 1% solution. They basically say that employers have to invest a certain amount in workplace training. If they don't, then they get an automatic payroll deduction of 1% that goes into a central fund that allows training for people who need it. And one of the problems with our workplace training right now is that almost all the workplace training is going to the people who need it the least. It's going to the people at the top of the ladder as opposed to those at the bottom. So the investments at the people at the bottom will probably have the potential to be most useful. The final, well, actually, two more things I want to mention. The family friendly workplace. Okay, this is crucial. If we have a perverse situation here in Alberta. We've got a tight labor market. We've got huge demand from employers for new employees, but at the same time, we're seeing our participation rate of women in the workplace dropping. And it's not because of social issues. It's not because of a conservative mindset. It's because Alberta has the worst system for childcare in the country. And if we really want to encourage more women to participate in the workforce, to take advantage of that huge resource that's out there, we have to make it easier for women to both raise children and participate in the workforce. And that's not going to happen until we take the bold step of having a fully funded public child care system, a $10 a day daycare system, a $15 a day daycare system. Instead of seeing this as social welfare, we should see it as an investment, not only in those individuals who will benefit, but an investment in our economy. The final thing I'll mention is the elephant in the room, which is the whole question of pace of development. And the whole pace of development is the strand that ties together many of the challenges that we're facing as a province and as an economy. Our rapidly rising cost of living, our tight labor market, the pressure on employers to bring more temporary foreign workers into the country, and the difficulty that our communities are having with handling the pace of growth. All of these things, if you connect the dots, go directly back to the fact that our provincial government hasn't set a more reasonable pace for development in this province. They basically approved every application for development that's come across their desk, and the result has been, predictably, all the developers are getting caught in the door at the same time, and we're suffering the downside effects of growth. So if we want to, fully realize the benefits of our resource wealth, we have to have a government that's willing to take a more decisive role in terms of being a steward for the resource, and that means setting a better pace for development. Anyway, sorry for going on so long, but it's a big issue, and thanks. I'll turn it over to Ken.
Okay, Iris, if you can tell me when I get close to 12 minutes. From my bio, you'll probably notice that I'm a former mayor and former politician. I've been accused of never meeting a microphone that I didn't like. So certainly thanks to the Alberta Congress Board for inviting me here today. Dawn, thank you very much. I'll just give you a little bit of a background of who the Alberta Chambers of Commerce are. The Alberta Chambers of Commerce is a federation of 127 community chambers in the province of Alberta. Those community chambers in turn represent 22,000 businesses in this province. Fully 80% of our members that are represented by our community chambers are outside of Edmonton and Calgary. We represent a wide range of small, medium, and certainly very large businesses. So our membership is very diverse. One of the strengths that we have with the Alberta Chambers of Commerce is that we have at least one community chamber of commerce in every federal and provincial riding in the province of Alberta. Certainly was interested in getting a bit of a history lesson about the Alberta Congress Board And chatting to the president of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, he mentioned to me that the Alberta Congress Board, in fact, was founded about 30 years ago by the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. So certainly I'm glad to be back today. The topic of this morning's discussion is labor realities in a transformed Alberta. And certainly I would suggest maybe a little bit of a modification to that title, that we should be talking about labor and business or management realities in a transformed Alberta. Certainly the pace of change is fast and furious. What we may have thought about even as much, dare I say, as 2 days ago, certainly some of those realities have changed in the last 24 hours.
Sub-themes have come from. This year's small group process has a slightly different product. The product of your deliberations in the next 2 days is going to be a resolution to be presented to the Saturday afternoon plenary session when we all come together. A resolution which will be discussed and voted upon, and I hope will become catalytic for your life and work in the year ahead, and indeed the next 20 years. Wouldn't it be great if when we leave this conference on Sunday morning or Saturday night, instead of forgetting about all of the things we've talked about, we actually work on them? And my challenge to you is that you retain your associations with your small groups after the weekend to continue your deliberations. So what are the focuses of the 3 groups? In session 1, you're going to look at defining and priorising the issues which your group sees as key regarding the transformation of Alberta into the province which you really want between now and 2020. You'll priorise those issues. And in session 2, you'll focus on what has to be done. You've recognised your top priority. What is it you're going to do? What is it that has to be achieved to get there? And you'll be asked to priorise those things. And then in session number 3, you'll develop the resolution which one of your group, not the recorder or the facilitator, did you hear that? Not the recorder or the facilitator, will present to the plenary session on Saturday afternoon. Explicit guidelines for each discussion are included in your brochure on page 23. And at this stage we have a couple of options. Option number 1 is this. I can read those guidelines to you from beginning to end, right here and now, and then administer a test. Would you like that? No. Thank God. Here's the other one. Facilitators, would you raise your hands, please? My request to you is that at the beginning of each session, you take 5 minutes and you read the instructions and then apply them. And my challenge to all of you in the groups is that you hold yourselves accountable. The recorders and facilitators need your help for your groups to be successful. Please do that. A few things to emphasize today. An innovation this year is in your rooms you're going to find some lined cards. I've sometimes been disappointed by the predictability of what we produce at the end of our conferences. And sometimes I wonder if some of us are nervous about sharing an idea which might not be popular with our peers, an idea which we think is perhaps too wacky. And I'm going to ask the facilitators quite early on to give you a couple of minutes to write on these cards the wackiest ideas you can think about with respect to your topic of discussion. And the reason is twofold. Are you going to have some fun? Yes, I hope so. But the principal reason is this. In my experience, somebody else's wacky, crazy idea is the seed of something brilliant. And that's what I would like you to get to in your small groups. So when you've all written those ideas down, facilitators, please collect them, and will you read them so that everybody can contribute in the knowledge that the rest of the group is not going to be pointing, saying, gee whiz, Martin, that's a stupid idea, why on earth did you think of that? And I know you wouldn't do that. Please use the cards as a catalyst for great ideas. Please record the names of the people in your groups on the worksheets. Sometimes there are people missing from your groups. We'd like to know who is it who has contributed to your sharing. The worksheets are in your handouts. One is goldenrod, one is grey. Here's the one which is goldenrod. Worksheets 1 and 2, at the conclusion of session 2, please turn those in to the registration desk. The paragraph supporting your resolution on worksheet 3 is incredibly important. And the reason is this: I'm going to be using that information as the basis for talking to you on Saturday evening. If I have no information, I'm going to have to talk to you about the medical procedures I've experienced in the last 10 years. Do you really want that?
No.
You don't? Okay. Please fill in that paragraph and you will avoid the pain. Fuel, coffee and water will be found outside your rooms. On your name tags, you will find your group number, and in your binders on page 23, the blue page, you will also find the group numbers and the names. And if you will turn to page 13 and the reverse of page 13, you will see where your rooms are. For those of you who haven't been to the conference before, the golf clubhouse is off-site. It's within walking distance. Simply leave the hotel by the way in which you drove in yesterday. Just beyond the last bungalow on your right, on the opposite side of Beauvais Road, you'll see the golf clubhouse. Your rooms are in there. The Edith Cavell room is the other room, which is a little bit difficult to find. Simply go downstairs, walk through the shopping arcade, turning to neither left nor right, and leaving your plastic in your pockets, and go straight to the end, and you will find it very close to the Meadow restaurant. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have an opportunity this weekend to produce something which is great, something which is going to make a difference. And for this to happen, you're going to have to be prepared to take some risks, to speak from your hearts, to share thoughts which might not be popular with your colleagues or those you work with. You had some great ideas from Preston Manning to widen our horizons last night. Let's continue that process. I've recently experienced a team-building experience which very clearly demonstrated that when we speak and act solely in terms of our self-interest, what we can achieve is incredibly limited. And the only way in which we can blast through that ceiling is to put self-interest on one side and concentrate on what is the best for our community. What is the best thing that we can do to build the Alberta we want in 2020? My challenge to you is that you go to that place. When you enter your small group rooms, please leave behind all of the labels, the titles and the hats you normally wear at work, and contribute sincerely, frankly, honestly, but most of all fearlessly and from your heart, because that's where you're going to find the stuff of a really great result today. I'm going to ask you to be in your small group rooms by 10:30, 15 minutes later than indicated. Please really strive to get there so you can start on time. And as my friend Ted says, go in peace. You are free people. But if you want to eat your lunch, be back here by 12:15, because otherwise we'll all have gone. Thank you for listening.
To present with other participants such as Alberta Smoking and Health, to present and bring forward and lobby for the elimination of smoking in workplaces. And certainly the media had a very difficult time getting back past the fact that the Alberta Chambers of Commerce and the AFL were represented in the same panel and actually agreed upon something. Certainly we heard last evening Mr. Manning speaking about cross labels. A blue environmentalist or a green conservative, I think were his terms. Now certainly, I mean, let me not mislead you, we are not about to link arms and sing Kumbaya and go into the future, but certainly there are a number of issues that we can cooperate on for the betterment of our province. Certainly the rest of the country is watching what's going on currently in Alberta. And I mean, I'm a native Albertan, I was born and raised here. I do perceive that there is a substantial amount of jealousy in the rest of the country in what's going on in Alberta currently. We're debt-free. Our economy is firing on all cylinders. Yeah, we've got challenges, but we need to rise to those challenges. We do not need, by inaction or by some overt actions, to turn around and fall on our butts, because that is simply not an option in this province. Were it not for Alberta, Canada would be in the midst of a recession. At the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, we have a long-term vision for the province that we're sharing with just about anybody who will listen. Certainly our partners, the Certified General Accountants Association of Alberta, and I think John Carpenter, the Executive Director for CGA Alberta, is in the room as well. We embarked upon a program called Vision 2020, and the whole and sole purpose of that was to provide constructive advice to governments, federal, provincial, and municipal, on issues that needed to be addressed for the long-term sustainability and prosperity of this province. Phase 1 dealt in great depth with the changing demographics in this province, what we can expect from expenditure levels going forward for 20 years, getting past a traditional planning cycle, which is coincidentally from election to election, moving off into 20 years. We dealt with an issue and made recommendations on sustainable municipalities, because certainly municipalities are the order of government that touch our members on a day-to-day basis and have the most effect on them. And our latest phase, Saving for the Future, again, provides constructive advice on what we need to do with the extra money that we currently find ourselves in possession with to save for the future, to provide for those demographic shifts, which are here and are coming big time in the next few years. Policies. Our policies are developed by an annual general meeting, which includes representations from chambers of commerce around the province. And certainly, I mean, our policies are not simply about cut spending, reduce taxes. You know, certainly those are things that business organizations look at, but certainly there are other policies, again, that you may not expect from a business organization, because simply we have a vested interest, as do our members, in improving this province, because they're all citizens of this province and they all live in the communities that we're talking about. We have a policy that's come forward advocating certainly for improved childcare in this province, an issue that Gil talked about. Certainly from the point of view that we're, there is a tremendous number of individuals who are not able to get back into the workforce simply because the childcare spots are not there. And I think there is a movement coming on that from the provincial government. We've encouraged in the past and had great success in getting the province to beef up funding for apprenticeship training. We have policies concerning job skills funding and training, diversification of the economy, and certainly another policy that Gil touched on was literacy. That is a major issue for the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. It's a major issue for our members, and certainly a major issue for the province and for the long-term prosperity of this province. One of the other policies that we do have in place is expanding and supporting destination sites in Alberta for immigrants. Certainly, Gil and I somewhat disagree on the necessity for foreign workers, the necessity to attract immigrants to this province who will be long-term contributors to the economy. Some of the issues that we deal with in that particular policy is once you get people here from another country as an immigrant, how do you keep them here? We are not getting our share of individuals immigrating to Alberta in comparison to the rest of the country. And simply that's a cultural and demographic issue. One of the other policies that we have is on retention of older workers. Certainly, if you remember the insurance ads from years ago, we always talked about Freedom 55. I think with the real shortage of labor that we have in this province, we're probably going to be talking about Freedom 75. Now, having said that, there are individuals who, when they retire, may in fact want to stay in the workforce longer. What our policy has gone forward to the federal government is that if somebody is over the age of 65, collecting old age security, and chooses to go back to work, currently, if they get over a certain income threshold, they pay tax, including the clawback of the old age security, to the tune of about 50%. So how can we expect to retain older workers within the workforce when they get penalized so dramatically in income tax? One of the other portions of that policy also speaks to allowing individuals such as that, who are now collecting their pension, to transfer any income that they receive for working directly into an RSP, without restrictions as far as their RSP rooms. You know, there are going to be policies, certainly, and there's going to be issues that we disagree on. And, you know, when we talk about the current labor shortage, we have to also recognize that there are certainly some sectors in this economy that are suffering right now. In touring around the province in the last week, and prior to that, last week being Small Business Week, you know, we certainly are headed for some major issues in the lumber industries. We have a mill in High Level which has shut down one of their shifts. I understand Drayton Valley, the mill out there, is shut down as well. Certainly conventional oil and gas. If anybody tours around this province, such as I have for the last little while, they're going to notice that when they get into the smaller communities, there's a substantial number of service vehicles that are parked in the lots. They're not moving. And certainly that's, again, because of the cyclical nature of what we depend on in Alberta, and that's energy. We definitely have a major issue. We have an issue right now with labor shortage, but if anybody thinks that that is a short-term blip, certainly the common consensus, I think, amongst individuals who are looking at where this is going, are saying that because of our aging demographics and the retirement bubble that's coming at us, we're going to be looking at major job vacancies that are going to go unfilled in the next 4 to 5 years. Projections from Statistics Canada suggest that there will be 100,000 jobs that will go unfilled in the province of Alberta alone by the year 2010. Just some of the things, some of the areas that are going to be having major vacancies. 20% of family doctors are considering retiring within the next 2 years. Has anybody tried to find a family doctor lately? This speaks to, again, attracting individuals, developing individuals in our own country, but also we simply don't have the demographics where we're going to be able to replenish those. RCMP, 50% of members are eligible to retire in the next 3 years. Protective services in the City of Edmonton and the City of Calgary have similar numbers of projected retirements. One of the, I guess, outfalls from this whole labor shortage issue, and certainly the economy in high gear, is owner burnout. There are a number of businesses that you start paying attention to them. Long-term businesses, long-term small businesses that are simply shutting the door. Eden Cafe. I just happened to head over there 3 days ago to go for lunch. They're a business that's been around in Leduc for 20 years. They closed their doors simply because right now of the labor shortage. That's a fact. Humpty's in Sherwood Park. Oh, sorry. See, told you I was going on too long. I guess, when we talk about things that I guess we're also promoting at the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, certainly minimum wage, when minimum wage came up for amendment, we did not oppose that simply because in our research, there's not a whole lot of individuals out there that are in fact working at minimum wage. The reality, most employers right now are paying well above minimum wage. I heard a number yesterday that the average wage in the oil patch is $38 per hour. Certainly small business is going to have a difficult time competing with that. I guess one of the other things I would leave you with is that there certainly are a number of common interests. We need to get past the labels. We need to cooperate to build a better Alberta. Can things be improved? Definitely. Are things all gloom and doom? Not really. One of the things that we need to do is we do need to celebrate our successes that we have in this province. That's one of the things that tends to boom economy, that tends to get forgotten. Certainly the story that we heard this morning from the chief of the First Nations of the Mackay Band, that's certainly a success story, cooperation. The Alberta Chambers of Commerce sponsors the Alberta Business Awards, a distinction which presents 15 awards on an annual basis, which celebrates employers and businesses who are success stories in this province. Blatant plug, sorry Don, but if you go to our website, there's an online nomination form. Let's help celebrate some of the successful businesses in this province. Thanks again.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, first of all, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm going to keep this as brief as I can. I'm in a different position between everybody in the bathroom. I'm a union president, as most of you know. I work for the Alberta Betty Trades Council of Unions, and we got 16 unions, about 25 trades altogether. Some of them are here actually, electricians. They're millwrights here. Most of the plants in Alberta, if you look at them, we probably built them, and we do a lot of the maintenance on them. But I don't want to come here today and talk a lot about our organization. We do have over 50,000 members. We have a website. Please go to it. And it's refreshing to hear Janine say that some of her employers want to invest their tax savings in employee wages. I want to second that. I'm going to talk about today's realities. Like we have a modern day gold rush, as I see it. Everybody is going flat out, and people are trying to keep up. And of these people, the most important I see are the people who buy their basic needs and needs we take for granted. We have to buy groceries. Who's going to work in the supermarket? How do the groceries get to the store? We need people to drive delivery trucks. We need people to serve in hotels and restaurants. We need people to pump gas, collect the garbage. People to fix our cars, etc. Goes on and on. We need qualified drivers to drive our school buses to take the kids to and from school safely. We need people to deliver the mail, fix our furnaces. You know the panic we get into when our furnace breaks down, we think we're going to freeze to death before the guy gets there. We need people that provide our basic needs at hospitals and senior citizens' homes and facilities. Sometimes I wonder if we know who are those people that clean our schools, our hospitals. To most of us, they're like faceless janitorial services, and their staff will rarely acknowledged for the essential services they perform. Now I find out that we don't have a janitorial affiliate in our unions, but the people at the Alberta Building Trades Council unions, we speak really for everybody who works for a living. You don't see people from those professions like that take care of our basic needs get any kind of awards or service awards in public. If there were no people to clean the washrooms in all the places we work and all the hospitals, our whole society would almost collapse. That is something that we really don't think about a lot. There are some of the people that I admire the most, are people who go to work every day, do those jobs. We have a guy comes clean our offices every week on a Friday, and he drives a very old vehicle. He's always happy, a smile on his face. Looks like he's always glad to come to work. I wish I could get there for him some days. And there are some of the people I admire the most. And what do they all have in common? They're the lowest, and generally speaking, the lowest paid workers in our society. Where do they live? We don't think about that too much. Where are they going to live? They're not going to buy a house, like you referred to earlier, in Calgary or Edmonton or Fort McMurray very easily. This brings me to the next topic where you probably think I'm going, is the affordable housing issue. And this is what I figure out. Affordable housing doesn't mean you get a house when you can afford it. If that was true, most of us would be homeless. Affordable housing means affordable to people who earn wages at the lower end of the scale and they can afford to make the payments. That's affordable housing. When you say infrastructure, most people think of roads and buildings. Infrastructure to me means part of this whole group of society that maintains it and take care of us, and we can't function without their essential services. When I came to Canada, I worked in a small town up in northern Ontario on Ellie Lake first, and you could rent a house off the mining company for $110 a month. They built a whole bunch of houses there and condominiums, and you paid rent on them. I couldn't afford to buy a house, and I was a tradesperson. It worked well, the company got their money back, and they still own the house. And that was an example to me of affordable housing. I think we have to address the affordable housing issue immediately, or we will have a serious breakdown in our society for those people. People have to have a place to live when they come to work in Alberta, whether they're working in the service industry or work in the oil patch. And if they go and work in McMurray and those areas, there's camp jobs there. But we can't just take care of the people who work in the camp jobs, the people that work in cities like Edmonton and Calgary and provide all those basic services. I see more and more every day. They don't have a place to live. They can't buy a house. We just put them out on the market. The income thing bothers me. We're evolving in a society now where there's a whole bunch of people up at the top of the income ladder and going higher, but we're leaving a whole bunch of people at the bottom that are not coming up in the income ladder. They deserve an opportunity to share in the wealth in this province as well. And they need help in obtaining education and training, and we have the resources to do it. I'm trying to go to some of the points that have been raised in the conference, like how do we adjust, like now, the skills we need in the construction trades over the next 20 years in the energy sector, which I'm most familiar with. They're not going to change that much, in my opinion, over the next 20 years. They didn't change a lot in the last 20 years. Some of the procedures change and the standards change, but the very basic principles of engineering and manufacturing and maintaining construction, they've remained the same for many number of years. In other words, we don't have to build a new wheel. We didn't build a new wheel 20 years ago. We just had to make it better and make some improvements on the one we had. What has changed drastically in the last number of years is the attitude towards safety in the workplace. There's been a bigger change in in the attitude towards safety in the last 20 years, in my opinion, than there has been in the previous probably 80 years. Unsafe work in the workplace isn't tolerated by society, not just by the employer anymore. It's not acceptable anymore to work unsafely. Rather than thinking about how we can adjust in the moment, which brings us to the other point in the conference, I think we should be thinking about this as a huge opportunity to change the whole structure of our workforce in Alberta. We have a booming economy, and I put this together before the announcement yesterday on the royalties. It looks like we're going to have more money going into much to Jen's dismay, into government coffers, but I think we have to use this revenue to train and educate our workforce, the people who are going to be coming in the workforce, to replace people like me who will be retiring. And I see this as a huge opportunity to diversify our whole economy. The last time we had a boom here, we didn't use, in my opinion, that opportunity to diversify the economy more. I think we have to get away from our addiction. I see it as an addiction to resource revenue from oil and gas in this province. We're totally dependent to a large degree on the revenue from oil and gas. We're about as dependent as the people in Nevada are on the gambling. I think we have to get away from this. I think this is a second chance for the province to diversify the economy in a major way right now. And I don't think we're going to get a third chance over the next couple of generations. Sooner or later, people are going to go, they're going to find something else you can put in your gas tank in your car other than gasoline. It's going to happen sooner or later. We need a workforce. We need to train a workforce in Alberta that are ready for the next generation. The baby boomers have carried the economies in most of the Western countries over the last 30 years. And I'm one of those people. You notice my hair is getting quite grey, and even some of us don't have a lot of hair left. We're moving on. I want to see some new people, young people come in, especially in the trades. I love to see 18-year-olds come in. I started on this trade. I'm a tradesperson. I started when I was 18 years old. I'm over 40 years in the trades. Who's going to pay my pension? We need some young people coming in to carry on, but I want to see the whole economy change. We need to have a really high-tech economy, value-added here. We have to come up with all kinds of stuff to address environmental issues, and I think we could have a huge base for that here in Alberta. We cannot be dependent any longer on this gas and oil revenue, but right now we can use it to educate and transform the workforce in Alberta for the next bunch of baby boomers. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Certainly, I want to thank each of the panelists for their most interesting and stimulating comments that they've made to us this morning. And I know that this will lead us into some very interesting discussion in our small groups. We were going to open the floor for questions, but in the essence of time, I think we're going to pass just because we do want to keep on time and want to get our discussion. To each of you, a very warm thank you for leading us in our discussions this morning. And on behalf of the Congress Board, I would like to present you each with a gift. Please join me in thanking our